Hello everyone, this is Stakewall channel. I am Ivan Stakewall. Yes, and today we have Comdex on our interview. Learn about their platform, their I would say network inside their platform, and all the possibilities that they can do with it. Yeah, I guess it will be very interesting. Discussion, interview, and hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to learn more about crypto and Cosmos ecosystem especially. So, hello.
Hey Evan, how's it going?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, how are you?
Very good, thanks.
Yeah, so can you please tell for the newcomers, for someone who just subscribed to Stakewall and didn't know about Comdex, what is it, just in a few sentences?
For sure, yeah. So Comdex chain is a DeFi infrastructure layer for the Cosmos ecosystem. So essentially, it's a chain that currently has three applications on it. One is called Harbor Protocol for the stablecoin CMST. We have CSwap, which is a DEX, and Komodo, which is a lending borrowing platform that are currently live on the chain right now. But the chain itself is basically able to facilitate the creation of any kind of DeFi application for Cosmos and makes it easy for anyone who wants to build DeFi to deploy their DeFi applications on the Comdex chain.
Could you please explain, like, tell us about the history of creation? How did you come up with this idea, and what was the process of creation?
So it kind of started when we sat down and thought about what the whole tech stack of blockchain, what it ultimately can do for bringing real world value or real world utility to everything that we have around us. And one of the kind of obvious spaces that we identified that required disruption and could significantly improve with blockchain disruption was the commodity supply chain. So we started our journey building out a product in the commodity supply chain space back in 2018. We built out our first app. We launched it in around 2019, which was primarily an institutional focused commodities trading app. But essentially what it was doing was tokenizing real world commodity assets as NFTs on the chain, and then allowing users to trade these NFTs among themselves as if they were real world commodities. And then, facilitate payments and facilitate financing against them was kind of the ultimate end goal of it. So in our journey of building out this application and kind of recognizing that this is the space that ultimately needs to be disrupted for blockchains to have a broader impact on the global supply chain, we recognize that at the heart of it there needs to be an infrastructure layer like a blockchain that actually facilitates creation of payments based solutions, financing based solutions, solutions for tokenizing assets, collateralizing assets, liquidating these collateral assets. And that's when we kind of arrived to the realization that the Comdex solution has to be broader than just a single application. It has to be an infrastructure that can facilitate creation of multiple applications, whether it's DeFi, whether it's CeFi, or whether it's CDeFi, where you have real world assets that are brought on chain and then there's a financing economy created around it. So in terms of our journey, that was kind of the thought process that brought us to this point of originally starting off with an app as a vision, but then recognizing that the chain has to be built out, which can facilitate not just one app but multiple different complementing applications that can facilitate other solutions like payments, financing, custody, and so on. And that's essentially in a broad sense the history. That's when we also recognize that for any kind of sustainable DeFi economy to function and grow, it has to be built on the back of a robust and a steady stable coin that actually facilitates movement of capital within this DeFi economy. And anyone who's familiar with Cosmos ecosystem would know that for the longest time, Cosmos ecosystem has lacked a native stablecoin. When Terra's UST was IBC enabled, it did fill that hole for some time, where there was a Cosmos native stablecoin in the form of UST, but the model that UST relied on and the algorithmic model, it kind of didn't stand the test of time. It didn't stand. It wasn't resilient enough to sustain its peg, and we ultimately saw the end outcome of how that played out. So that's when we recognize that not only to power Cosmos DeFi but also to power the Comdex DeFi that we're building, we would require a more robust stablecoin at the heart of everything, and that's how we arrived at building CMST, or Composite, which is our stablecoin on the Comdex chain. It's essentially an over-collateralized stablecoin backed by multiple crypto collateral assets in an over-collateralized way. And then to kind of further create liquidity for the stablecoin, we have the DEX, which is CSwap, where you can have swapping of different crypto assets with the stablecoin and with other assets as well. And Komodo, which creates a basically a money market in the form of lending, borrowing markets for different crypto assets, again including the stablecoin as well.
Slightly touched the next question, like what was your main challenge building your products? Yeah, can you tell us about it?
I think when it comes to building any kind of DeFi, the biggest challenge is always the figuring out the mechanism and figuring out the risk that is associated with the products that you build. Uh, because when you look at what happened with UST and how it had kind of a repercussions on other applications in the Terra ecosystem, you tend to recognize that building any kind of DeFi is a very tricky ground to enter, because ultimately you're building a product where users are going to be deploying their own capital, their own savings, or their own money into that protocol. And on the building side of things, we have to ensure that everything that's built out is waterproof. There's no kind of room for anyone to exploit it. But on top of that as well, we also have to think about how that system that you build reacts to different conditions in the market, different volatilities that can come around, different market events that can occur. Because ultimately, it's all about when it comes to finance, when it kind of comes to economies and money, it's all about user psychology and how they kind of behave to different impulses and different stimulus. And we had to think of a system that, of course, caters to the kind of macro conditions that we are in right now, whether it's downturn in global economies or downturn in the crypto economies as well. But also in future, when situations can change, when circumstances can change, the sustainability of any of the applications built should never be in question. That was kind of the biggest challenge that we wanted to address head on and be on top of. So I would say, uh, in terms of figuring that out, I wouldn't say as much as is as much a challenge. I think the bigger challenge is being sure of the work you have done and whether it actually does that. So you always kind of second guess, you always question yourself, you question your decisions. Sometimes you arrive at the right decision, but you still want to take more time to figure out if that was the best decision. And trying to fit all of that in the context of a timeline that you commit to, and you say that certain things will be delivered by certain timelines. I think that was the biggest challenge that we faced. But luckily for us, I think things went smoother than we expected for the most part. And most of our building happened in a very kind of streamlined fashion, and we were able to deliver the three applications as well, which are all now live. So going forward, I think the challenge for us will be to improve the user experience for everyone who uses it, and kind of just make it a better experience. So not only the existing users have a better time using the applications, but also new users are drawn to come and use the apps we have built.
Okay, yeah, well, speaking about new users, like there are lots of projects on Cosmos, and there are some even stable coins that will be live very, very soon. So, can you please tell me why they should explore your ecosystem, explore your token? Yes,
Yeah.
just like
So
Comdex.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, because when you look at the Cosmos ecosystem itself, there's plenty of solutions that exist. Of course, DeFi. When you look at DeFi and Cosmos, and you compare it to DeFi, let's say in Ethereum and Arbitrum and Solana and other ecosystems, it does feel like Cosmos is still playing catch up with other ecosystems, where there's still a lot. I would still consider it's early days for DeFi and Cosmos as a whole, where we haven't seen the level of utility, the level of liquidity build up in the Cosmos DeFi ecosystem as others. So a big part of that was, of course, not having a native stablecoin at the heart of it. As you mentioned, there's CMST, of course, but there's also other stablecoins that other projects are working on in the Cosmos ecosystem right now. There's also USDC, which is going to be natively issued in Cosmos at some point in 2023, which I think would be a great move for Cosmos as a whole, because it takes us away from bridged USDC right now, which entails bridge risk, and brings us to native USDC, which ultimately makes it safer for us all. So in that sense, I think it's all welcome changes in the ecosystem. But in terms of our own approach towards doing what we did, by first creating this singular DeFi infrastructure layer in the form of the Comdex chain, we were able to address kind of the requirement that any DeFi application can have in the form of modules. Each module on the chain focuses on a particular primitive that exists in the realm of finance or in the realm of DeFi, and it's ultimately an ingredient in creating any kind of financial instrument. So with our modules, we have the stablecoin, the DEX, the lending borrowing, which kind of forms a base layer money market, But what users can do beyond that is combine these products and create their own sort of strategies, whether it's to have leverage staking, leverage LPing, leverage based strategies, hedging. All of that is now possible with the applications that exist. Of course, it's also possible when each of these applications exists as individual app chains across different chains. But what I think the benefit of doing this all on a singular chain is that the UX is significantly better when a user wants to interact across multiple applications in a single transaction on the same chain. So ultimately, it kind of becomes a game of composability versus interoperability. So you can have multiple apps on multiple chains in Cosmos which are interoperable with one another. But if I, as a user, wanted to have a single transaction interaction across 3 or 4 different apps, it's ultimately creating a different UX where now I have to have chain approvals of transactions sent across multiple chains. And in my own kind of just interface of using this application, it's the Kepler pop-up that pops up multiple times for me to approve each thing. By having all of these sit on one chain, it unlocks composability, which is ultimately getting atomicity of transactions. So in a single transaction, I could mint the stablecoin, deploy liquidity in the DEX, use the LP token from the DEX to mint more stablecoin, and create kind of a leveraged LP exposure on a single position by a single click. Or alternatively, I could also have leveraged staking, where in a single click I could have something like ST Atom used as collateral to mint the stablecoin. The stablecoin is then used to purchase more ST Atom from the DEX, which is then again collateralized, again creating kind of a leveraged exposure on that ST Atom position. So unlocking these kind of strategies and making them more user friendly is ultimately, I think, what is going to drive a lot of good UX in DeFi going forward. So our approach towards building it all on a single chain was primarily, as I mentioned, the good UX that comes from this atomicity. But secondly, it's also when you think of the governance of the chain layer itself, when you think of governance of the Comdex chain, because it houses each of these DeFi applications, the governance of the chain can now have a singular focus towards optimizing each of these applications so that they can work together synergistically, uh, as opposed to each of these applications existing as individual app chains having their own governance, which would then create room for competition of interests between these applications. So although certain apps might have more synergistic use cases with one another, the token holders that ultimately govern those individual app chains might have competing interests with one another, which can maybe not now, but at some point in the future create some sort of kind of friction in the overall functioning of these applications when it comes to how they work with each other. So in that sense, I think by having a singular DeFi focused chain which has these applications and is governed with that DeFi focus, it'll also ensure that in the long run, all these apps are running more synergistically with each other.
Okay, well, so you basically like choose the Cosmos ecosystem because it's in the long run, it will be better, even though in a short run there's like a lot of issues right now. Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
Cosmos is still early days, I'd say. We're still early when it comes to everything.
We discussed this question like if the Cosmos is early, because as we see all other chains like Ethereum, which you mentioned, you said that like it's a much more developed network, but as I see, Cosmos is much more developed, but there's no as much people and not much liquidity as in Ethereum. But yeah, Cosmos is really well developed and has a lot of good ideas which other networks could implement. Now, would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, in our own kind of subjective experience, when we started off building out Comdex as well, it was back in 2018, 2019. Uh, at the time, for the use case that we were building, we wanted to do an extensive research of, which is the best technological stack that we should go with to build our product. At the time, of course, we knew that proof of stake would be the future, and we wanted to kind of remain proof of stake aligned from the very beginning. And that's how Cosmos kind of entered our radar, because back in 2019, I think Tendermint was kind of the gold standard for proof of stake, and that's how we entered the Cosmos picture at the time. But when we started building in 2019 itself, there was not much documentation on how to build using Cosmos. So a lot of the hard work we had to do early on was because it was just because we were being early in the space. We had to kind of figure out our own way to get around things, which is why I feel like even today, the reason something like Ethereum DeFi is so much more advanced, one could say, than Cosmos DeFi, is because today a new builder who enters Ethereum ecosystem looking to build something has very easy access to resources, easy access to documentation, and can figure their way around things. Whereas on Cosmos, of course, one part of the challenge is figuring out the product itself, like what DeFi product you want to build. Is it sustainable? Is it the right model? Is it the right way? It's going to work the right way, the UI, the UX. There's so many different things. But after you figure all of that out, you also have to figure out Cosmos tech itself, and then build your product on that tech, learn this new tech, and kind of deploy using that. Which is why in our own approach of building the Comdex chain as well, we recognize that by building a chain that has these modules, automatically built into the chain with a very plug and play customizable kind of approach, anyone who wants to build DeFi could just utilize these modules, customize a few parameters, and deploy their applications, which will make the next wave of DeFi products much easier to go to market than the previous one, which had to kind of build their own app chains, figure out the tech stack from scratch, and then build out.
Can you tell me what you're doing right now? Not go into plans, not go into future right now, but what's recent achievements that you got?
So most recently, just as of a couple of months ago, we had all the three apps go live. I mean, it started off with Harbor and CSwap, and Komodo went live more recently. So our immediate focus right now is to improve the overall user experience of these applications, because we've been collecting a lot of feedback from the community. I think there's been great support from the community who have been using the application and taking time out to communicate some feedback to us. So our job is now to pick up all this feedback and incorporate that into the applications to improve the overall experience of using the applications when it comes to UX and when it comes to features as well. But additionally, it's to work on some more feature upgrades in the existing application set. So for example, on CSwap, we're now working on range pools, and we're also going to have the order book fully functional on the CSwap DEX, which should be very soon going live now. Once that's live as well, within the kind of existing suite, we'll also be focusing on onboarding new assets into the chain and into the ecosystem. So when it comes to something like CSwap, listing new pools with newer and newer assets. On Harbor, it will be having newer collateral sets being added to Mint CMST. So we recently had Osmo, which got enabled as a collateral after Atom as well. And soon we want to enable liquid staking derivatives like ST Atom, ST Osmo, and so on, which can be used as collateral to mint the stablecoin as well. So broadly speaking, on one end, it is enhancing user experience and enhancing features. Creating more horizontal integrations with different assets, different collateral assets, or different pools of liquidity.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and so as we go from now to the future, what plans do you have? Maybe you have some leaks, especially for Stakewell.
So, the future is very exciting. Of course, when you look at the macro kind of conditions, one would say this is the bear market or this is the downtime. But I think it's a great time for us as builders to kind of go back to the drawing board, get to building and get to building more sustainable products, which will actually bring the next wave to the industry. So at our end, one of the bigger focuses that of the Comdex chain has always been to incentivize building on the Comdex chain. So in the Comdex tokenomics as well, we have 12.5% of the tokens allocated towards ecosystem dev fund, which will ultimately be used to issue grants to builders who want to build on the Comdex chain. So a large part of what we're going to be doing this year is reaching out to builders who have products in mind that work synergistically with the existing set of products we have on the Comdex chain. Provide them with the support that we can from the chain end, from the team, from the development, to actually fulfill their building journeys or building applications, and then seeing a broader suite of applications on the Comdex chain. So in the immediate sense, we've already had integrations with folks like White Whale, with Skip, which will ultimately serve and bring a lot of value to existing Comdex apps. But we're also in talks with some builders, who have independently approached us with certain ideas that they believe they want to build on the Comdex chain that could add value or could exist synergistically with the existing set of applications. So the focus for this year, for the future, is work with more builders and bring more and more DeFi utilities, have more more places for our stablecoin CMST to go and have utility as well, and ultimately just bring a lot more external liquidity into Cosmos DeFi and into Comdex DeFi.
What advice would you give anyone who is building their crypto project somehow connected with any assets in the Cosmos ecosystem?
Um, I think the best piece of advice would be, of course, there's always a pressure or internal pressure that you can create as yourself as a builder, that if I've committed to a certain timeline, I have to get this product out by that timeline. But I would say never ever compromise on security or quality for timelines. Like in my mind, that's just not a trade-off. Is focus on the perfection, focus on security, and if it means delays in timeline, I think it's something you can deal with. It's worth doing.
Can you please describe what is health factor of your stablecoin?
Yeah, so CMST is a over collateralized stablecoin backed by crypto assets in over collateralized way. For those who would be familiar, it's the model is very similar to the model utilized by DAI from MakerDAO. So essentially, users can mint the stablecoin by creating over collateralized CDPs of Atom, of Osmo, and in the future other assets as well. And ultimately, from the protocol, you're always able to mint the stablecoin at a constant price of $1, which means if the price of the stablecoin in external markets is ever above $1, you can mint it from the protocol for $1 and sell it for more than $1 to create arbitrage. And conversely, if it's ever below $1 in external markets, because all existing stablecoin is essentially loan from the protocol or debt from the protocol, you're able to acquire that stablecoin at less than $1 to close your existing debt positions. So that's how the protocol maintains its kind of the stablecoin maintains its peg over time. And then with the collateral assets, like whether it's Atom or whether it's Osmo, if we start to see volatility in Atom markets or Osmo markets where the value of Atom or Osmo declines, then the protocol is able to liquidate that Atom or Osmo to ensure that all the stablecoin debt that exists is solved at all times. So this is essentially how the stablecoin maintains its stability, because it's a model that we've been taking inspiration from MakerDAO's model for DAI. It's one of the most robust and I would say secure stablecoins, which has kind of stood the test of time over multiple years. So I felt like that was kind of the best implementation to go for a decentralized stablecoin for Cosmos, and that's what we've done with CMST.
Can you say that it's unique, that there's not such thing in all the crypto, that your unique crypto asset?
I would say presently it's not unique because, as I said, MakerDAO already exists with DAI, which has the same kind of model for the stablecoin. But what does make it unique is that presently, if you look at the Cosmos landscape as well, it's the only stablecoin that has an Atom CDP as well as Osmo CDP as well as a PSM, which is also open source. So that's one big advantage, and kind of the future kind of competitive advantages that the stablecoin will have is, of course, integration of liquid staking assets like ST Atom and ST Osmo. But with the CSwap DEX itself, users that provide liquidity on the CSwap DEX, the LP tokens of that liquidity will be used as collateral to mint the stablecoin as well. So that's something new that presently doesn't exist in any stablecoin protocol out there, in Cosmos at least, and that'll be kind of a unique factor of CMST going forward.
Okay, speaking about uniqueness, and you also mentioned it, that there will be native USDC on Cosmos, and how do you feel about it? Does anyone actually use CMST while there is USDC?
So, I think firstly, it's a very welcome move for USDC to issue natively on Cosmos, because it reduces the overall bridge risk of the ecosystem. Currently, with all the USDC that exists, it's all, from Gravity Bridge and Axelar. So that will solve the bridge risk for the ecosystem as a whole to begin with in the first place. But in terms of whether CMST can continue or can coexist with USDC, I think a great example again is to just look at Ethereum, where DAI has kind of coexisted with USDC for as long as DAI has been around. And then the large reason I think behind that again is they ultimately serve two different users or two different niches for markets, where USDC is ultimately a centralized stablecoin, which is backed by fiat, which is ultimately controlled in a centralized fashion, and we rely on on Circle to have that kind of reserve to actually back all the liquid USDC that exists out there. Whereas when it comes to DAI, all the reserve that sits on the protocol is completely accessible by everyone. We all know it's over collateralized. We can check the chain to see how much of that collateral actually exists, and it's also fully decentralized in the sense that tomorrow, for whatever reason, regulations or sanctions might require that certain wallet addresses that USDC be blacklisted, and then that USDC becomes void. But that could never be the case with DAI, because DAI is a fully decentralized stablecoin, which means that anyone holding DAI is never in the fear that the DAI they hold in their wallet could be blacklisted. So ultimately, that serves a decentralized use case for the same product, which is a stable coin. And that's what we want to do for CMST as well in Cosmos, is to have a decentralized stable coin, which users don't fear being blacklisted for holding, and users don't fear not having transparent view into the reserves of that product, of that stable coin on the protocol. So in that sense, I do think both USDC and CMST could coexist in the Cosmos ecosystem as well.
You mentioned DAI a lot, but there was another one algorithmical stablecoin, UST, Luna, and we all know what happened. Yeah. Can you please explain what risks does CMST have because of its algorithmical nature?
So CMST is actually not algorithmic as a stablecoin. So what that means is, when you had UST, the way it worked was every UST was redeemable for $1 worth of Luna, and every dollar worth of Luna could be converted to a single UST. But where that system failed was, at times, if the prices of Luna suddenly start declining, you would have users, basically the value of UST is backed by the value of Luna, and when the value of Luna declines and people stop having, or the value of UST declines at the same time, it kind of creates a negative feedback loop where neither of the tokens are able to go up. In the way that CMST works, it's backed by over collateralized set of crypto assets, which means that at any point, let's say Atom, if someone uses 250% of Atom to mint stablecoin, it's like $250 of Atom against $100 of the stablecoin. If the value of Atom starts to decline very rapidly, the protocol still remains safe because the protocol is liquidating the Atom at a defined threshold. So if we define the threshold to be 120%, where if the value of the Atom that sits in the protocol falls to $120 or below, then we're able to liquidate that Atom via an auction mechanism. And on the auction, anyone who participates in the auction can obtain that Atom at a discount from its market price. So ultimately, what you're able to do is achieve arbitrage by obtaining the Atom from the protocol auctions at a discounted price and then sell it immediately in an external market, whether it's Osmosis or CSwap, to make up that price difference. So ultimately, what this means is that so long as liquidations function and users do participate in liquidations, all CMST debt that exists on the protocol is at all times solvent. We also have Stablement, which is kind of like a PSM on the Harbor protocol, which allows minting the stablecoin 1:1 against USDC, DAI, USDT, and other such stablecoins. Currently, it's just USDC and DAI, but we'll be onboarding more stablecoins there. So this will help achieve short-term arbitraging, where if people recognize that CMST is maybe 1 cent above or below, or 2 cents above or below its target price of $1, then users can quickly use USDC to mint this new stablecoin in CMST, or use CMST to redeem USDC against it to close that gap. So in that sense, the model is fundamentally very different from the algorithmic model of UST, and it's fundamentally more secure because it relies on over collateralizations and smoother liquidations of collateral assets.
Oh, okay, thank you. But yeah, actually, the questions like, so how does Comdex, what oracles do you use for prices of assets like gold or something like that?
So we had the C Assets app go on DevNet. I think it was early 2022. I think it was Q1 or 2022. So at that time, we were relying on band protocol for oracles, and the only oracles for commodities we had at the time was gold, silver, and crude oil. the way it kind of worked was, in a very similar way, where we allowed users to collateralize crypto assets to mint the gold or the silver as a synthetic asset on the protocol. But of course, when we kind of got into actually testing out the product ourselves internally, and then even opened it for testing for public to use on DevNet, we recognized that in low liquidity environments, the application was not very sustainable, where we couldn't maintain sufficient liquidity for each of the synthetic assets to actually maintain the peg of these assets to their underlying. So whether it's synthetic gold maintaining its peg to gold, or silver maintaining its peg with silver, in low liquidity, it was becoming a challenge, which is why we had to kind of rethink the model about how we release that. Because with that model, with current kind of crypto macroeconomic conditions, liquidity as a whole has been drained out of crypto tremendously in the past few months. So what we need to now, what we're now considering, of course, is one part of the change that we're considering is moving away from AMM liquidity pool based model towards an order book approach, where we'll have order book trading of these assets. But of course, in the way these assets are minted itself, rather than going for the maker DAO approach of how these assets are minted, we're looking at an alternative where I think a successful implementation of that is SNX synthetics in the Ethereum ecosystem. But of course, I think it's still early days to commit to which model we'll actually end up choosing, because at our end, focus has to be on actually perfecting the model, simulating things, figuring it out if it works in the current liquidity environment and in different liquidity environments that we expect to see over the next few months. So in that regard, I think we're still in the process of figuring out how the implementation would be done for that. And then, of course, when we want to expand the collaterals, the commodity set beyond just gold, silver, and crude oil, it would also be dependent on what price oracles are available to onboard new, uh, commodity types. So those are the two kind of things that we need to consider before actually pushing that live and expanding it.
How can we actually prove? How can you prove your assets of Atom and other token that you use for your stablecoin?
So it's all open source. It's all on the blockchain and it's all visible. So even today, if someone just goes to the Harbor Protocol app, one of the first things you see is how much CMST exists, in circulation right now, and how much collateral sits in the protocol against it, and what those collateral types are. So how much of it is USDC, how much is Atom, how much is Osmo, and so on. So ultimately, anyone who wants to verify how much reserve exists against the circulating CMST, it should be very openly visible on the app itself. And if someone wants to go a layer deeper and actually verify it on the chain, everything is open source, and the chain is open for anyone to kind of verify. So that creates a complete kind of trustless environment for users to trust that the protocol reserve actually exists.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I guess it's clear now for everyone. So, speaking about your company, there are lots of projects. Just name them. Like it's whole ecosystem, like Harbor Protocol, C-Swap, Komodo, C-Assets, ShiFi. Can you explain us, like describe uh, all the structure of your business and actually of your company, and how do you work with all of that?
Yeah. So in essence, we kind of see each application that we're building, or each product as we're building, as a synergistic kind of complementary solution to each other. So, for example, when you look at Harbor Protocol, which is the stablecoin protocol, of course you have a point of minting the stablecoin from the protocol in Harbor. But in order to build the liquidity for that stablecoin, we require a DEX where that liquidity exists, which is why we have CSwap built out. Then beyond that, to have more utility for the stablecoin itself, I think one of the largest use cases for stablecoin right now is to earn yield on it from lending borrowing protocols, which is where Komodo comes in. And together, these kind of operate as a singular money market, product. But when you think of where our journey started, it started with building a solution for commodities trading in the real world, on the institutional side. And we recognize that payments and financing would be two big pieces of that puzzle that need to be solved for that space to actually be fully disrupted by blockchain. And for the payments piece, stablecoin again becomes a very critical part of how to achieve that payments, because presently these institutions rely on Swift or wire transfers for making multiple six-figure, seven-figure dollar volume transactions, which end up taking several business days to process. With stablecoins, and with smart contracts, you can have kind of on-chain verification of documents, on-chain verification of contracts, and just have the payment processed, in a matter of seconds or minutes, as compared to the traditional system of multiple days. So the payments piece is solved with the stablecoin itself. With the financing piece, it is the ability to convert real world assets as on-chain assets and then unlock liquidity against them by treating those assets as collateral, which is where a product like ShipFi comes in. Because the long-term vision with ShipFi is that we'll have commodity traders and commodity institutions that can bring their real world commodity assets on the Comdex chain and can tokenize them for exchange with each other. But ultimately, the way the commodities supply chain, or any supply chain for that matter, functions in the real world is they're all heavily dependent on credit and being able to access financing against the assets that they hold. So unlocking this capability for these users or for these institutions to collateralize their real world assets on the blockchain and tap into blockchain liquidity in the form of financing against them will be another kind of game changer, which we believe is the disruption that this space needs. So in many ways, when you think of these products individually, it seems like we're building different products in different places. But for us, from our perspective, we've always been kind of solving the same problem. It's just that we've recognized that solving the problem is not a single product problem. It's a thing that requires multiple products to be working synergistically to actually address that problem itself. So when it comes to the financing problem in the real world space of supply chain, the stablecoin will facilitate payments. Something like ShipFi will facilitate financing, and using the stablecoin in that financing itself will ultimately solve a lot of what the institutional side suffers with today. So in our approach, it's still solving the same problem statement. It's just each piece serves a different function in the broad goal, which is to completely create transparent and efficient supply chain markets in the commodities space.
Okay, well, but how does it work with your team, like with the people? Can you explain, like, do you have like every team for every product, or just like one functioning member who works with all the products?
So we have actually got a pretty large team. We have around 15 developers and several more folks in the research and product side, and a lot more folks in non-technical roles as well. Within the dev team itself, the way it's structured is that we have a few senior folks, or few experienced folks who have taken responsibility of individual products, and then with the developers that we have, going along with them, they kind of contribute their efforts across products based on what their alignment with the product is. So largely speaking, our dev team is kind of split across the three products until it was released. Now that it's released, a few of them are freeing up their own kind of workspace to improve the products and think of what next set of features and upgrades or improvements can be brought to these products.
So can you please describe why do you need actually uh, the whole separate blockchain of Comdex? Well, we could have it on Juno, like with same algorithm. Uh, why did we need it?
So the approach for Comdex is that it's a DeFi focused layer one, in the sense that the design of the layer one is primarily focused on facilitating any kind of DeFi application creation. So the modules on the chain are all just looking at how traditional finance operates, looking at how DeFi operates, breaking down existing products into individual transaction types, recognizing them as primitives, and then kind of coding them in the form of modules. So in that regard, why Comdex exists as an individual chain is that it's heavily DeFi focused, in that anyone who wants to build a DeFi product, no matter what type it is, will actually be able to utilize whatever modules exist on the chain to build that product out. So and then, as I said earlier on in the call as well, where for the governance of the chain itself, it will be a very singular focused governance, where the aim of all the governance on Comdex is to make sure the chain runs efficiently and all the products operate synergistically with each other on the chain.
How are going um, to have liquidity on your project?
I think solving this liquidity problem is kind of like the biggest challenge that the whole crypto industry faces right now, because with all the events that happened in the past year, with the collapse of Luna, collapse of Celsius, Voyager, Vault, FTX, we've seen a large wave of retail liquidity leave the crypto market, which ultimately will have to make its way back to crypto for all of us to be successful in everything that we build. So first thing I think is for Cosmos ecosystem itself. DeFi has been growing tremendously in Cosmos in the very recent times. So I think that will obviously draw a large amount of liquidity towards Cosmos as these products develop and improve. We're all familiar that DYDX will be launching with its own Cosmos chain, at some point this year, which I think is a very positive move for Cosmos DeFi, because DYDX was one of the most utilized layer 2 applications on the Ethereum side of things. With them launching their own blockchain in the Cosmos side, we'll see a lot of that liquidity come towards Cosmos as well. But to answer your question, I think long-term solution for bringing in more liquidity is heavily dependent on, I think, good UX, because currently the state of just the state of DeFi, state of Web3 as a whole, I think UX is something that's still not up to the mark. Uh, a lot of times, even experienced users find themselves making mistakes on certain DeFi protocols, which you cannot reverse, because it's once things are done on the blockchain, they're done. So to that regard, building out more robust solutions that have smooth functioning UX that new users can be onboarded on easily will be like a number one breakthrough that needs to be achieved for more liquidity to come into to Cosmos.
Thank you for this interview, Siddarth, and subscribe, all of you who are watching right now. Subscribe to our channel. Yes, for more interviews, hit the like button and tell us in the comments who would like you to see in the next video. And bye.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Thank you.